My name is Stephen, and I will tell you what happened to me a year ago, which I still cannot fully understand. I work as a foreman, and I'm married to Katie. We have a 3-year-old daughter named Molly. That evening, Katie went to her friend Susan's birthday party, and I had to stay home with the baby. However, things at work got hectic, and the bosses were putting a lot of pressure on me. So I called my mother-in-law, Valerie, to ask if she could help out with the baby. She immediately agreed. Valerie has always been a very supportive person, and she never hesitates when we need her help, which is something Katie and I are both very grateful for. I should mention that my mother-in-law is a striking woman. She is 42 but looks no older than 35. In her youth, she was into dancing, and even now she keeps herself in great shape, slim and graceful like a ballerina. Her dedication to staying active and healthy is admirable, and it shows in the way she carries herself. I had never thought of her in any romantic way. She was my mother-in-law. After all, but that evening, things took an unexpected turn. It was like something shifted between us, something I never saw coming. I got home around 10 p.m., exhausted. Katie was already home, but she was barely able to stand because she'd had too much to drink at the party. I sent her straight to bed. By that time, Valerie had already put Molly to sleep. She was about to leave, but I insisted that she stay the night since it was so late, and there was no transportation available. She hesitated for a moment, but then agreed, saying it was probably for the best given the circumstances. I sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and trying to unwind after a long day. Valerie came in and sat across from me. She suggested we both needed to distress, given how tough the day had been. I pulled out a bottle of cognac from the cupboard, left over from last New Year's Eve, and sliced up a lemon. We started drinking, and the tension slowly began to dissipate. We talked about work, family, and life in general. It felt surprisingly easy to open up to her, and the more we talked, the more I felt a connection growing between us. I started to notice things about her I hadn't before: the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she was passionate about, the softness in her voice, and how comfortable she made me feel. Things weren't smooth between her and her husband. My father-in-law was barely ever home, always working or watching TV, giving her no attention or care. Valerie confided in me about how lonely she often felt, and how she missed having someone to talk to and share her life with. After the third drink, I began to see her differently. There she was, a beautiful woman with sparkling eyes, passionately talking, using her hands to gesture. At one point, I leaned closer, as if to hear her better. She was telling me about her youth and her love for dancing, and her voice trembled slightly. She spoke about the dreams she once had. I don't remember how it happened, but I found myself putting my arm around her shoulders. I thought she would push me away, but she didn't. Instead, she leaned into me, her eyes meeting mine, with a look I had never seen before. It was a look of vulnerability, of longing, and something that made my heart skip a beat. I remember her scent a light floral perfume and feeling dizzy, either from the cognac or her closeness. Then, everything became a blur. I recall her hot lips whispering softly, "Stephen," quietly. How we ended up in the guest bedroom, I have no idea. Valerie turned out to be incredibly passionate. I never expected that. We tried to be quiet so as not to wake the whole house. Katie slept deeply in our bedroom, and Valerie and I spent the entire night together. We finally fell into a heavy sleep in the early morning, exhausted and overwhelmed by what had just happened. I remember lying there next to her, my mind racing, my heart pounding, and feeling both exhilarated and terrified by what we had done. I woke up to the sound of Katie getting up to take a shower, hungover. She was already in the kitchen making breakfast, like any other day. I couldn't even look at her. I was consumed with guilt. Valerie, on the other hand, was calm and greeted me with a casual, "Good morning, Stephen. Want some coffee?" Her composure was astonishing, as if nothing had happened, while I felt like my world had been turned upside down. I couldn't understand how she could be so composed after what we had done. She smiled at me, a knowing smile, and I felt my stomach churn. The guilt was almost unbearable, and I kept wondering if Katie could somehow sense that something was different. This secret affair went on for another 2 months. Valerie would come over to see her granddaughter, or I'd visit them under some pretense or another. Every time we were alone, the tension between us was palpable. We would find ourselves drawn to each other, unable to resist. Katie didn't suspect anything, nor did my father-in-law, who was always at work, coming home late and going straight to bed. Valerie and I would steal moments together, sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes in the guest bedroom. It was risky, and I knew it. But the pull was too strong to ignore. I would tell myself that it would be the last time, but it never was. The thrill, the danger, the passion, it was all too intoxicating. We had developed a routine. Valerie would come over under the guise of spending time with Molly, and once Katie was occupied or had gone to bed, we would find each other. Sometimes it was just a stolen kiss in the hallway, a whispered conversation in the kitchen, or a touch that lingered too long. Other times it was much more intense, desperate encounters that left us both breathless. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was betraying Katie in the worst possible way, but I couldn't stop myself. There was something about Valerie, about the way she made me feel seen and desired, that kept pulling me back. But eventually, the passion between Valerie and me started to fade, and all that remained was the overwhelming sense of guilt. I couldn't bear to look at Katie. She was so trusting and kind. Every time she smiled at me, it felt like a dagger to my heart. I began to realize how much I was hurting her, even if she didn't know it. The weight of my actions became too much to bear, and I knew I had to put an end to it. I couldn't continue living this double life, deceiving the person who loved me the most. The excitement had turned into dread. Every time I saw Valerie, I felt a mix of longing and shame, and I knew that it couldn't go on. I put an end to it. Valerie understood and didn't push back. She agreed that it was the right thing to do, and we both knew that we couldn't keep going down that path. It wasn't easy. The first few weeks were filled with awkward silences, lingering looks, and a sense of loss that I couldn't shake. I missed her, the connection, the thrill, but I knew it was the right thing to do. Now we live as we did before, but sometimes at family gatherings we catch each other's eye. There is an unspoken understanding between us, a shared secret that will always be there. Katie often wonders why I talk so little to her mother these days. I give her short answers because, really, what could I say? I can't tell her what happened between us. I can't explain the guilt, the regret, and the confusion that still linger. I can't tell her how, even now, there are moments when I think about Valerie and what we had, and I wonder what might have been if things were different. I still don't know if I regret what happened. Part of me feels guilty for betraying Katie, for crossing a line that should never have been crossed. But another part of me can't forget the connection I felt with Valerie, the passion and the intensity of those moments we shared. It was wrong, and I know that, but it was also real. And that is something I will have to live with for the rest of my life. The memories of those nights, of the way she looked at me, the way she made me feel, will always be there, just beneath the surface. I try to bury them, to focus on my family, but they linger like a ghost that refuses to be forgotten. I don't know if I'll ever fully come to terms with what happened, but I do know that it has changed me. It has made me see the fragility of trust, the consequences of desire, and the complexity of the human heart.